Good morning, and welcome to the Sunridge Church of Christ. It's great having you with us today, and our prayer is that through our time of worship, that you get closer to God. My name's Rob Gigg, and I'm the pastor here, and we really have one simple mandate, and it's this. We want you to be able to get closer to God. It's through the singing that we listen to, through the Lord's Supper, through the Word being opened. And really, that's what it's all about. Worship is about us being able to get closer to God. And so our prayer is that in our time together, whether you're here in the building, whether you're watching it from home, that you simply just are able to get closer to your Heavenly Father, to be able to see the promises that He has, to be able to see all the things that He wants to bless us with. And it's just amazing that we have this opportunity. It's not typical for us to be able to have to look through a TV, but that's what God's given us right now. So we ask and pray that through this time together, that you do get closer to your God. And we thank you again for being with us. We ask a blessing upon you.
How many people here have seen The Passion of the Christ? Quite a few. Interesting movie. My sister sent me a link to an article on that particular movie, and especially about Jim Caviezel, who was the actor who played Jesus in that movie. I'm just going to read this article. Mel Gibson warned actor Jim Caviezel that playing the character of Christ was going to be very difficult, and that if he accepted, he would most likely be marginalized by Hollywood. Caviezel asked for a day to think about it, and his response to Mel, who was funding and directing the movie, was, "I think we have to make it, even if it is difficult." And something else. My initials are JC, and I am 33 years old. During filming, Jim Caviezel, who plays the part of Jesus, lost 45 pounds. He was struck by lightning. He was accidentally struck twice during the scourging scene, leaving a deep 14-inch scar. He dislocated his shoulder when the cross was dropped into the hole with him on the cross. He then suffered pneumonia and hypothermia from being nearly naked with only a loincloth on the cross for endless hours. The crucifixion scene alone took 5 weeks of the 2 months of shooting. And this was filmed on up in the mountains in Italy and in Italy's winter. So it was cold there. His body was so stressed and exhausted from playing the role that he had to undergo heart surgery, one of them open, after the filming process. Jim explained, "I didn't want people to see me. I just wanted them to see Jesus. Conversions will happen through that. Almost like a clairvoyant prediction, many amazing things happened." There were several of the cast who were converted to Christ following the filming of the movie. But this is what happened to a guy, an actor, portraying Christ on the cross and prior to the cross with a full medical staff on hand. He's just acting this out. He gets time down off the cross, get back up again for another scene. Get time to get down, get warmed up, take away the stress, get back up there again. But he still lost 45 pounds. He was hit twice actually by lightning and had to have heart surgery following it. So this is an actor that is playing the part of Jesus. Now think about Jesus on the cross. No medical staff on hand. He's there to die. No chance to get off the cross and recuperate. But yes, there was a chance to get off the cross. At any time, he could have called 12 legions of angels. One angel could have taken him off that cross. Why 12 legions? That's about 70,000 angels. And I believe, had Jesus not gone through with this, it would have been the end of the human race. If he had called those angels, it would have been the end of humanity. God almost wiped out humanity once before, except for Noah and his family. This time it would have been final, I believe. So we think of Jesus and the horrible agony he went through on that cross, and he stayed there, having a way out, but he stayed there because he knew the consequences of not staying there. He loved humanity so much that he stayed there. He endured 6 hours of hanging on that cross until he decided when he should die for our sins. So we have a lot to be thankful for as we take these emblems, our very existence, I believe, but also the opportunity to clear that wall of sin that separates us from God. With that out of the way, we are children of God. So let's give thanks for bread that represents the body that was so brutalized on our behalf. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for your Son, Jesus, who went through with a crucifixion that was so horrible and so brutal, but offered his body as a sacrifice on our behalf. Your sacred lamb. We thank you so much for this. In Christ's name. Blood throughout the Bible has tremendous significance, I think beyond what we can understand in terms of what it means to God. And Dave made a good point back a few weeks ago when he took the table, saying that it had to be, Christ had to take on human form. A spirit doesn't have blood. Blood would not be sacrificed except from Jesus in human form. And so blood, the significance of blood is even magnified when we think about Jesus on that cross, the blood that he shed, because that blood has the ability to cleanse us, to remove sin from our lives. Let's give thanks. Dear Lord, we are thankful for this atoning sacrifice, the blood that Jesus shed on that cross that is able to remove our sins. Thankful so much for the new relationship that it created with you. In his name we pray.
Messed up there. Hebrews 11, and we're looking at verse 30. We're going through and looking at these different characters of faith. And my goal and my prayer is that as we look through these characters of faith, that our faith can grow, that we can learn from these characters. These characters in no way were perfect in any way whatsoever. They had their sins, they had their foibles, they had all their faults that they had in their life, but they still were extremely faithful in the things that they did and the steps that they took in their life in order to prove their faith. And we see in here, verse 30, it says, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. Anyone ever heard of the story of Jericho? I would imagine that every single one of us has. If we went to Sunday school at any point in our lives, the guys marched around 7 days, 6 days, and then the seventh day they went around 7 times, da-da-da-da. It's a very good story, and I'm not even going to talk about it today. I'm going to give you an assignment to read it at the end of the sermon, but I want to know what got them to the point that they had the faith in order to take on something like this. And it's because of one person, which surprisingly is not even mentioned in the list. It's Joshua. And Joshua is the person that takes them out of Egypt or out of the wilderness, I mean, and into the promised land across the Jordan. And we read this story, if you go to Joshua chapter 1, we're going to start there, and we're going to get an understanding of what Joshua was like. Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give to them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book on your law. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua is about to take the Israelites out of the wilderness and into the promised land. And this is a promise that has been going on, as it says at the very end there, that it was for the ancestors of Moses. And we know about this promise. It goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 12. I'm going to look at that very quickly. But Genesis chapter 12, God spends some time with Abraham. He's Abram at this point. And he says to Abram, I want you to pack up all your things. I want you to leave your father and your mother. I want you to leave your family, and I want you to go into a land that you don't know anything about. Verse 4 of chapter 12, so Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Morah at Shechem, and at that time the Canaanites were in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. Okay, so Joshua is taking the people into a new land that was promised to Abraham. How long do you think it was between Joshua and Abraham? Can anyone take a wild guess? Or an educated guess? 700. 700 years. 700 years, Joshua is finally taking the people and fulfilling a promise that God said to his people, the Israelites, I'm going to take you to a land that is going to be great. Now, we've studied a lot from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and Moses, and all the different things that they went through, the time in Egypt, and it was an amazing time that they're in slavery for 430 years with Pharaoh and Moses finally comes along. And then they start this 2-week journey that takes them 40 years to be able to complete. And now Joshua is about to take them into this new land. It says over in chapter 15, if you go over in Genesis, in verse 18, on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, to your descendants, I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates. It's the land of the Kenites, the Kezanites, the Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. It's a whole bunch of different people that have sight problems, I guess. I don't know, but there's lots of sites there. But here, God was making a covenant. He was making a binding agreement, a pledge, a promise to Abraham that I'm going to lead your people, your descendants, into a new land. And 700 years later, Abram's long gone. He's been dead for many, many, many years. For about 500 years, he's been dead. And here, God promises, and Joshua is the one that is going to take it into fruition. And when I look at the faith and what it means to have faith, and this is my first point that I've got, faith is remembering and it's relying on the promises of God. I think that's a very important thing for us to know, that we have to rely and we have to remember the promises that God has. In verse 6 says, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors. God's saying to him, remember the promise, remember the oath, remember the pledge, remember the covenant that I made with Abraham, that I was going to bring you into a different land. It's happening today. I've decided that it's going to happen today, and you are going to be the ones that are going to lead them into that land. 700 years. And I think some of the time when we look at God's promises, we say, well, why haven't you taken care of it yet? Our timing is totally separate from what God's timing is. But we get very impatient. And we get to the point where it's like, God, I've been praying for this. I've been asking this. Well, you haven't been asking 700 years. You know that. But Joshua never, ever forgot God's promise and was willing to go in and fulfill that promise by taking God's people into that land. Wow. So, faith is remembering and relying on God's promises. God always keeps his promises, and he never forgets what he promises. There's another thing in here in what we read about Joshua. Faith is not just remembering the promises, but it's also going after them. If you read verse 3, it says, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. What does that mean? Everywhere that you set your foot, I'm going to give you this land. That means that Joshua had to physically do something. He had to move. God wasn't just going to say, okay, here it is on a silver platter. I'm going to give you the whole land, and wherever if you get to it, he says, no, I want you to go into the land. I want you to physically move. And anywhere that you set your foot, it's going to happen. It's interesting. If you look at how it is with Moses, if you go over to Deuteronomy chapter 2, or 11 in verse 22. God's saying to him, if you carefully observe all my commands I give you to follow, to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him and hold fast to him, then the Lord will drive out all these nations before you, and you will dispossess nations larger and stronger than you. Listen to this. Every place where you set your foot will be yours. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon and from the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea. No one will be able to stand against you. The Lord your God, as he promised you, will put the terror and fear of you on the whole land wherever you go. Now, God had just said to Moses, I'm going to let you go into a land, and anywhere that you put your foot. And God's saying to him, you need to move. Now, the sad thing is Moses ran into some troubles, and he wasn't able to go into the promised land. He wasn't given that ability. He was taken by God. We don't know where he was buried, as we talked about when we talked about Moses. But we see here that we need to be active in our faith. We need to not just be sitting around waiting for God to take care of everything in our lives, but But here he says, anywhere that you set your foot, anywhere you move to, I'm going to bless you. You know what? I think one of the songs that we sing some of the time needs to be moved around, because I don't think we've got this. We sing standing on the promises. I think some of the time we're sitting on the premises. We just sit around and we wait for God. But here he's saying, I want you to move. I don't want you to just sit around and wait for me to do all these amazing things. Joshua, he says, I want you to go in, and anywhere you put your foot down, I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to give you the land. And he's already determined the land where it's going to be. He's got the maps all set out for him. And once you set your foot down on that land, I'm going to give it to you. Wow. The thing is, we want God a lot of the time to do amazing things for us. But are we willing to lift a finger or move a foot in order to meet him where he's at? And that's what he's saying to Joshua here. That's what he said to Moses. Anywhere you put your foot, I will bless you. Well, faith is not just remembering the promises. It's not just going after those promises, but faith is also understanding that we are constantly in God's care. And because we're in that care, we can be courageous. If you look at verse 5 in this preamble about Joshua, he says, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. What's God saying to Joshua here? I want you to move. I want you to get your feet going. I want you to take the people across the Jordan, and I want you to do some amazing things. But I want you to remember something, Joshua. It's the exact same thing that I said to Moses. It's the exact same thing that I said to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, all these other men, all these ancestors before you. I am going to be with you, and I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. My question is, has God changed? No, he hasn't. The God that was with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses, and Joshua, and it goes on through David and all the other people, Samson, all these different men. Was he just with them and then all of a sudden no. The God that they served is the exact same God that we serve. The God that gave them all the power and authority and abilities to be able to do things is the exact same God that we have. Wow. It's amazing that God says to him 3 different times. What are the things that he says about him? I want you to be what? Strong and courageous. He says it to him 3 times. I want you to be strong and courageous. But right before he says that all the time, he says, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be the one that's going to help you in all these different ways. It's amazing when you look at who this Joshua was. And let's get a little bit of history here. Let's go back to Numbers chapter 14. Find out when Joshua first comes into the picture. Moses is getting ready to send the Israelites into the promised land. And so he chooses 12 different men, 12 spies. And he sends them out to see what the land is like. And they come back and they make their report, and they're like, "Wow, it's an amazing land. It's a land that's flowing with milk and honey." And they came back and they were carrying a bunch of grapes, and the grapes were so big that they had to carry it on a pole between 2 men. And they come back and they give the report, and 10 of the guys say, "You know what? I don't think we can do this. There's people in there that they're like giants to us, and there's absolutely no way that we can really go in and take the land. I think, Moses, we just need to stay here." Well, two guys spoke up. The first one was Caleb. And Caleb speaks up and says, no, these guys aren't telling you the truth here, Moses. We can take the land. God is going to go before us, and he's going to lead us, and he's going to take us into this land. It's amazing when you look at the story. In verse 30, it says, Caleb silenced the people before Moses, said, we should go and take possession of the land, for we certainly can do it. But the men who had gone with him said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they explored. And they said, the land we explored devours those living in it. And all the people we saw there were of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our eyes, and we looked the same to them. In chapter 14 in Numbers, that night all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if we had only died in Egypt or in the wilderness, why does the Lord bring us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephtun, who were among those who explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid of the people land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites, and the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. Moses said to the Lord, then the Israelites will hear about it. By your power you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell the inhabitants of that land about it. They have already heard that you, Lord, are with these people, and that you, Lord, have been seen face to face, that your cloud stays over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But if you put all these people to death, leaving none alive, the nations who have heard this report will say, the Lord was not able to bring these people in the land he promised them on oath, so he slaughtered them in the wilderness. Now may the Lord's strength be displayed as you've declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion. He does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sins of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. The Lord replied, I have forgiven them as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb was a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Since the Amalekites and Canaanites are living in the valley, turn back tomorrow and set out toward the desert along the route of the Red Sea. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites, so tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. In this wilderness, your bodies will fall, every one of you 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census and who was grumbling against me. Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb, son of Jephtun, and Joshua, son of Nun. Wow. it's sad because at the beginning of the journey, when they leave Egypt, they leave so victorious. And we looked at that story last week, how they went through the Red Sea, and it was just amazing. And it didn't take very long, just about 3 days, and they started to grumble. And God says, I've listened to you grumble about all kinds of different things 10 different times, and I'm tired of the way that you don't put your trust and hope. You don't see how I care for you, and so therefore I'm going to wipe you out. Moses is like, God, wait a second. I'm going to plead on behalf of the people. I need your love, and I need your forgiveness, and I need your mercy. And he says, yes, I am a forgiving, but they are still going to pay for their sin. And he says, not one of them, except for Caleb and Joshua, are ever going to be able to go into Canaan's land. And so Joshua here, he doesn't look at the problems. The other 10 did. But what did he see very clearly? And he says to the people, we can do this. We can certainly go in. This is a great place for it. We can certainly do this. Why? Because God is with us. And we can go in. Wow. So, this whole new generation of people, he says, I want you to get ready. In 3 days, we're going to have a journey. We're going to cross the Jordan. And that whole story in chapter 3 and 4 of Joshua is an amazing story. It's just like the Red Sea. And it says that Joshua told the priests to get the Ark of the Covenant, which God presided in and lived in. And they said, I want you to walk in front of the people, and it's going to be surrounded by an army of soldiers to protect you. And when you get to the Jordan River, as soon as you get in, it's become dry ground. They had maybe heard from their parents what it was like to be able to walk through the Red Sea. Now they were going to experience the same thing going through the Jordan. And they stepped in, and sure enough, a great wall. And it was interesting because the time that this was happening was during the harvest time, and that's when flood season is. And so the Jordan was just flowing like crazy. And then all of a sudden it just stops in a big wall. And all the Israelites, the whole army crosses. And they get on with dry ground. And then God says to Joshua, he says, tell the priests, come out from standing in the middle of the Jordan. When they're in there, I want you to choose 12 men. And those 12 men are supposed to take a stone. And that stone is going to be an altar, built into an altar to remember. And when your kids ask you, what does this altar mean? It's the day that we went from the wilderness and went into Canaan's land. And it's going to be an altar and a memorial to remember that God was with you, and he stopped the headwaters of Jordan, and you were able to walk on dry ground. And then God says to Joshua, tell the priests to get out of the river. And as soon as the last guy takes his foot out of the river, the water goes back to normal. It's all filled, running water like crazy because of the floods during harvest time. And lo and behold, what's the first thing that they see? The city of Jericho. The city of Jericho, and God says, I want you to go, and I want you to take it. And so I want you to read the story of Jericho and see if these guys relied on God's promises that he was going to be with them. See if they not only relied on his promises, but whether they stepped out on their faith and did something about it. Not only that they stepped out and did something about it, but that they rely on God to take care of them through this battle. It's very evident that they did in all of those circumstances. Because, and I've watched a lot of war movies. I can't ever remember Patton saying, just march around the town in 7 days. I can't see Custard saying, this would be a good way for us to beat our enemy. Just don't say a word. Just carry this big ark around and have some guy blow some horns for a few hours and go for a walk. They all knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that God was going to go in and fight that battle. And I just want to explain to you even what they saw. The city of Jericho, its walls were 50 feet tall and 50 feet wide. People lived in the walls. We're going to study about one of the people that lived in the walls next week. Rahab. He lived in the wall. So here they're seeing this, and they're like, okay, we just got over this dry ground. We got through the river okay. And now the first thing that we've got here is you want us to take this fortified city, which is blocked up, that people can't get in or people can't get out. And you want us to do it how? You know what? There's no questioning. Joshua led them because he listened to God. And God said to him, I want you to be strong and I want you to be courageous. And that's exactly what he did. And he led a people to be able to do something which every kid in Sunday school gets to learn about. But the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. If God did not prove himself that day in the way that he was taking care of his people, how he was fulfilling a promise 700 years old, that's amazing. But they never give up. That's what faith is all about. It might take a while for us to get what we want accomplished in our lives. And to be quite honest, it may not even be in our lives. Like Moses didn't get to go in. Out of all the people that were in the census, 20 years and older, all those men did not get to go in because they rebelled against God. They didn't get to go into the promised land. Some of the time we'll have things happen to us and, God, where are you? Why are you letting this happen to me? Why? God is faithful. And he will take care of us. Now, I believe that even those that didn't make it into the physical Canaan's land, when they died, they made it into another kingdom. We'll see that. And we'll get to talk to people and say, what was it like going through the Red Sea? What did you see? What was it like eating manna? What was it like when you went in and you took a nation and you didn't even have to lift your finger and God took care of the two kings? He just completely destroyed those 5 nations. What was it like? And we'll be able to talk to those people. We may not get what we want in this life, but the Canaan that we're looking forward to, yes. Because what? Because he is faithful, and he will take care of us, and he will never forget. That's his promise, that he will always take care of us. Now, that means that we need to step out. Is I'll take care of you, but you got to step out, and I'll give you what you want. And we need to understand that it's not our strength, it's not our ability, but it's his ability and care in our lives that we'll be able to do amazing.
God's faithful and asks us to be faithful to him. And these stories that we get to regenerate and talk about and think about, these stories that we've learned in Sunday school all our lives, that they're not stories just to be able to, oh yeah, that was really neat that they got to do that. And they, oh yeah. It's about men and women that had faith, put it into action. And were able to do things that were so extraordinary because they put their faith in God and not themselves. When they did put their faith in themselves, when they started to do things, that's when problems happen. But when they turned to their God, when you look at leaders like Moses, Joshua, Abraham and Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, men who put their faith on the line and did things that were amazing. Those are the people that I want to be able to look at, amplify in my life. Those are the people that I want to be able to say, yeah, that's who I want to be. I want to see great things happen. The only way it'll happen is having a simple faith. And you know what? I was praying this morning and I was thinking about it. You know what? It's not about how much faith we have. It's us coming to God and saying, you know what? Have faith help my unbelief. With the Father, Jesus. Because I do believe that you can heal it. Just help my unbelief. And I think some of the time we figure this whole faith thing, oh, I'm just not. Start with what you have. Accept from there. Know that God will be, he'll never. Just the same he was with the Israelites.